So, our reading today is a poem called Quietness by Rumi. Has anyone read that before? Okay. Quietness goes like this. Inside this new love die. Your way begins on the other side. Become the sky. Take an axe to the prison wall. Escape. Walk out like someone suddenly born into color. Do it now. You are covered with thick cloud. Slide out the side. Die and be quiet. Quietness is the surest sign that you have died. Your old life was a frantic running from silence. The speechless full moon comes out now. Thus ends the reading. So my Zen teacher's teacher's teacher was a person named Charlotte Joko Beck. And Joko Beck described our individual lives as small whirlpools in the wide stream of life. Each of us like little collections of debris and matter swirling around, occasionally bumping into each other, crossing paths, before fading and rejoining the larger body of water. She said that our attachment to the permanence of our whirlpools is our constant human struggle, because we're so afraid of what will happen when the whirlpool fades into the water. Our whole energy goes into trying to protect our supposed separateness from each other. She writes, not seeing that we are simply a whirlpool in the river of the universe, we view ourselves as separate entities, needing to protect our boundaries. Beck later describes that most dichotomies like life and death are essentially the same thing, since we are never separate from the fabric of belonging, from that wide river that we all return to and come from. But we don't really accept that fact as humans. I certainly don't. We are afraid of suffering, with defining life and holding on to it as it is. We don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to lose safety or to enter the unknown river. We know that feeling of clinging to something because it feels good, knowing that it is ephemeral and it will change, but clinging nonetheless. For example, in September, my wife and I learned that our beloved landlords were going to sell their property and that we would have to move from our apartment in Woods Hole. The apartment was dreamy when we found it, kind of by luck. It was 2 stories. It was filled with light. It had been freshly painted when we moved in. It was warm, it bordered on the forest, and we loved our landlords like family. My wife, who has had to move many times in her life and who is a markedly more pragmatic person than I am, she was okay with it. She was sad but not rocked. This is what happens when you rent someplace, she said. She kept her cool as we considered logistics and next steps, allowing her disappointment to settle quietly as she focused on the task at hand. I, however, wept for 7 days. I fell into a sort of prolonged depression for about 2 months, sighing all the time, crying whenever I looked out the window at the trees, mourning the skylight in the second bathroom, mourning the second bathroom. I'd convinced myself that we were going to live there forever. We were going to have babies there, find a way to buy it, and die there. Every night that we pulled into the driveway the week before we moved was heartbreaking. It's the 7th to last night we get to come home here. It's the 4th to last night we get to come home here. On and on and on. I couldn't fathom different trees or a longer commute to work. New neighbors, a new town. Worst of all, I felt hurt by the universe, as if my luck had run out and I was being punished for something I didn't know I had done wrong. But we said goodbye to the rocks in the backyard, the long driveway, the boughs of trees bent over it, and the ocean like a parenthesis on either side of us, and we moved to Sandwich. In doing so, I realized that our home is a lot more flexible than I had thought. Many of you probably already knew this. You are adults and you have moved many times. New for me. We have the same couch. We have the same inherited kitchen table. We have the same 2 cats who need to be fed. Most importantly, and most sturdily, it seems we have each other. So this little house that we've taken over as our own is as much home as the last one, if not more, since moving has made us even closer than we were before. Though things have changed, it feels that they actually haven't changed at all. So Rumi, our poet today, He was a Sufi mystic, and he wrote Quietness in the 13th century. Obviously, he didn't have an iPhone, so he couldn't read the news about LA. He did not know that we are 1 week away from an inauguration that feels it will tilt the axis of the earth. Instead, Rumi spent most of his life in holy contemplation, cultivating a direct relationship to God. He likely spent a lot of time with his eyes closed, deepening, counting his breaths, saying prayers and mantras that he knew by heart, dancing ecstatically and making holy music, feeling at home in the simple familiarity of his body. Quietness is a love poem to God. Inside this new love, die, Rumi says. He's not telling us to actually die, but to let our old attachments die, to relinquish our control over our small whirlpool and allow it to shift and change as life moves through it and around us. I wonder what ego he left behind on this journey. Walk out like someone suddenly born into color, as if he is saying, remember, you always belong to life, to everything, to each other. The universe has not forsaken you. Become the sky, take an axe to the prison wall, escape. Rumi's inviting us to break free from our separateness, from this false belief we often have that we are not all made from the same material. Your way begins on the other side of that, he says. But when life throws us transitions like moving, I become extremely impatient for that other side. Where is the feeling of home? Who will my people be there? When will I feel like I belong? And moving is obviously only a microcosm, a small example of the changes life is always throwing at us. What about larger, graver concerns? When will the earth be healthy again? Will it ever? When will my neighbors love me again? When will I belong to this country? And though Rumi and Joko Beck are guiding us towards quietness as the path through these doubts, they were monastics their whole lives. Easy for them to say, close your eyes, leave your old life behind, but the rest of us probably need help to face the fact that life is only ever changing. So to manage this, I turn to familiar comforts. I cook, I meditate, I call my family and friends, I cuddle my wife and cats, and I listen to a lot of music, Broadway most especially, but also sea shanties and playlists from when I was younger. There is a particular song that I turn to in times of transition by the mid-2000s British indie pop band Bastille. Does anyone know Bastille? Yeah, I didn't think so. They're not famous. But they had one hit in 2013 called Pompeii. If you listen to the radio, you probably know it. You know it. There was recognition there. Great. Okay. So I'm going to read you the first verse, and then I'm going to sing the chorus. And please, if you know it, sing along. So the first verse goes like this. I was left to my own devices. Many days fell away with nothing to show. And the walls keep crumbling down around the city that I love. Gray clouds roll over the hills, bringing darkness from above. Okay, here's the chorus. But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing's changed at all? And if you close your eyes, I know some of you know it, does it almost feel like you've been here before? How am I going to be an optimist about this? How am I going to be an optimist about this? Goes on and on. So the song was woefully overplayed on the radio. It's an earworm, and when you hear the recording of it, it has this sonic blandness that was typical of all music in 2013. But for some reason, when I hear it, I cry. I imagine an ancient Roman citizen in a dirty toga watching Mount Vesuvius erupt on the horizon, wondering if the lava will come for them too, not knowing if it will. And then I imagine that citizen closing their eyes as the song instructs and feeling in a way that everything is right where they left it. The dishes in the cupboards, the children in the other room. Even as the volcanic ash and rock flows toward them, nothing is actually changing. These citizens of Pompeii may have known in that moment what Beck and Rumi spent their lives learning and teaching, that if you close your eyes, you can remember your place in the vast water of the universe, a place that is much more important and immutable than the fantasy of permanence. And perhaps what this song offers me when I am frantically running from silence in the midst of the noise is an invitation towards quietness, a reminder that I am a part of everything. When a song gives me this, I can't help but cry. And so on many drives to school and work this fall, I listened to Pompeii and wept about the house we were leaving behind and that things were about to be different. But I want to recognize that having to leave the warmth of a rental house in Woods Hole and being able to easily find another is not a crisis of Vesuvian proportions. It's certainly not one for me and my wife, who have jobs and health and access and family. And it's certainly not a crisis in a country where cities are burning, where people are being threatened to be deported. Certainly not even in a town where our neighbors are houseless every day with no clear path toward safety. So, in the final part of this sermon, I want to tell you about one such neighbor here in Falmouth who I've had the privilege to know. We're going to call him Mark, but that wasn't his name. I didn't know Mark very well, but I did know him from my old job in a recovery setting. He was young and he was homeless. He spent his days walking up and down Main Street. You may have been able to recognize him if you live in town. He would often stop at the coffee shop where my wife used to work to use their bathroom or their stoop. Mark carried his home with him, and he treated the world as his very own house. The beach bench was a resting place, the parking lot a gathering place, and his long walks were his gym. In the absence of a couch or an heirloom kitchen table like we have, Mark knew how to make home wherever he found himself. And in the absence of close family, Mark knew how to make family out of literally anyone. He was a regular at my office, knocking on the door to talk about the news, to tell me about a scratch he had noticed on my car. He'd borrow tea bags and scissors and my yoga mat, and he would become, for a few days, like my family. And when he went to the coffee shop where my wife worked, everyone knew his name, his food preferences, his smoking schedule, his moods. And I do think that Mark knew more about us than most of the people we call friends, because he got to see us at our worst. We were stressed at work. We were awkward as we tried to navigate his homelessness. We were tired, impatient, ungrateful, afraid. He could see through our veneer of generosity. But he accepted us for all of ourselves, continuing to return, recognizing us as part of his large human family. I don't want to mislead you by describing Mark as one note. Like all of us, he could be messy. He could be like a volcano erupting unexpectedly. And when I witnessed him in those moments, I imagined him asking of his life, how am I going to be an optimist about this? How am I going to be an optimist about this? When you work in addiction treatment or in a coffee shop, it's against the code of ethics to tell people you love them. But the fact is, we do love our clients, and they do deserve to know. While there was no professional room to tell Mark that he was loved for exactly who he was, it feels wrong I can say it to you now, but never to his face, when it may have meant something. In October, we lost Mark at the age of 29. He was a beloved member of our town. In the communities that knew him best, people in recovery, people in houselessness, have been grieving his loss all season. As his small whirlpool faded and returned to the wide waters of the universe, I want to turn to him as my best teacher, who had more lessons for us about life, perhaps than any book or Zen teacher or mystic or song. Mark was aware that life is precarious and our comfort is not guaranteed. The whirlpools that I so feverishly protect, the apartment I never want to leave, he knew those already to be fickle, impermanent things. As such, he taught me that we cannot separate ourselves from each other. The risk is just too high. He showed me what it looks like to take an axe to the prison wall and to escape, to be embarrassing, to be honest, to be himself, no matter the circumstances. He taught me that home is wherever you are. Family is whoever's around you, and love is whatever you're doing. Our way begins on the other side. Let us become the sky. We are all made of the same stuff, Mark knew. We are all standing in the valley at the foot of a volcano. So let us love each other immediately and unconditionally, because our lives do depend on it. When you leave today, I want to invite you to do a few things. First, I want to invite you to listen to Pompeii, the song, easily found on YouTube. I cannot say the video is as inspiring as the song itself. Be forewarned. But then what I really want to do is invite you to love everything in every object and every person that you see. In chaplaincy and therapy, we call this unconditional positive regard, an orientation we try to cultivate to all of our clients. Do not fall for versions of life so constrained and afraid that love is only offered where we have deemed that it is earned. And in moments of fear or overwhelm or heartbreak, which there is so much of today, I want to invite you to close your eyes and remember that home is wherever you are, family is whoever you are with, and love will always abide by you. Belonging is your birthright. Blessed be.